We think we know what the Atlanta Braves need to do this offseason, but does the math agree with us? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, November 11th, and happy Veterans Day to those of you who have served and their families. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Christian is off today. He served in the United States Navy. His wife is active duty and home from deployment. So I said, buddy, go take Veterans Day and spend it with your wife and your daughter. Don't worry about covering the Atlanta Braves. He'll be back tomorrow. You can follow the show on Twitter at Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of the written work, bravestoday.com, because this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And a little bit of a different tack to take on today's show. We've talked a lot this offseason about the cases for upgrading different positions. How do you feel can you find an improvement at shortstop? What do you need in the rotation or in the bullpen, right? Do you need another lefty arm? Do you need to find a back-end guy to replace Joe Jimenez? All of this stuff. But before all of the advanced projection stuff comes out this week, I wanted to look to see on Fangraphs right now, in their depth charts for every position for the Atlanta Braves, they give not only all the players who should get playtime and the amount of playtime they should get, but also expected stats. Batting average, on base slugging, weighted on base average, which we'll explain in just a second, as well as a WAR at the end of the season for each player at each position. We have our ideas of what we think Atlanta should do this offseason. Does the math agree with us, or do they think the roster as currently constructed will be fine at that position? So we're going to start with position players, right? We're going to go through the diamond, look at the breakdowns at each position. Again, these are the Fangraphs depth charts. They combine their projections with projected playing time from the roster resource tool there on Fangraphs to figure everything out. And the most interesting one to me is the changes at catcher. Because as we know, we talked about this, Travis d'Arnaud did not have his option picked up. The team is open to bringing him back, but for less than the $8 million salary. And there is a surprising amount of interest in bringing in veteran Travis d'Arnaud for his age 36 season next year. I know a lot of Cubs fans want Fried and d'Arnaud as a package deal. So let's look at how the Braves would do without Travis d'Arnaud behind the plate. And we talked in the Sean Murphy show about 2 weeks ago how it was important for Atlanta to get Sean Murphy going, right? That they needed to have him play 4 or 5 straight days to get his bat going in the lineup. And in this projection, they absolutely are. The playtime, this is based off of 640 plate appearances from catchers, which I do have to ask a little bit of a question there because every other position is normalizing to 700 plate appearances. And I don't quite know why you are behind that with catcher. I don't know why catcher's only at 640 and the rest are at 700. But of the 640 at catcher, Sean Murphy is projected to take 429 of them, batting .233 with a .417 slugging and a .322 WOBA. And to explain weighted on-base average, it is a version of on-base percentage that accounts for how you reach base. In Moneyball, Billy Beane has a kind of famous quote in the movie, so Brad Pitt has a quote about he gets on base, do I care if it's a hit or a walk? And in a simplified look at this, no, you care that he got on base. But if you're trying to project out performance, you absolutely do care because certain ways of reaching base are more valuable than others, right? A home run is obviously more valuable than a walk. So what weighted on-base average does is takes how you reach base and determines how much that thing is worth in projected runs scored. Obviously, a home run, you are guaranteed to score a run, right? They adjust this for how valuable the way you reach base is. So weighted on base average is a little bit of a better idea of how valuable a guy's contributions are. And for instance, in this right here, you can see Sean Murphy's on base at 321, weighted on base at 322, right? Pretty consistent there. Drake Baldwin is projected for 141 plate appearances. He's the primary backup there with a 236 average and a 319 on base, but a 302 weighted on base, meaning they're expecting less home runs, less extra base hits, more walks and singles for him to get on base. So it says, yeah, his on base is a little bit misleading because it's not as valuable as it could be. And so ultimately in this, they have Sean Murphy as a positive, both hitting and fielding, and coming out at 2.8 WAR. Drake Baldwin is coming out at 0.6, again, 141 plate appearances, and they have him at exactly neutral on fielding. And then Chadwick Tromp, 70 plate appearances, batting 225 and worth 0.2 WAR. So 3.6 WAR coming from Atlanta catchers in 2025. I feel like it's all going to be contingent on, can Sean Murphy actually hit? They actually have Baldwin as a better batting average than Sean Murphy, but the slugging is there in Murphy's favor. Even the WOBA is a little bit weighted towards Murphy over Baldwin. The question here is going to be, it's all dependent on how well Sean Murphy can hit. This feels, I don't know if they're going to have Baldwin come up right away. I've talked about this before. I am no longer on the trade Drake Baldwin train. Let's clarify that. I get a lot of grief about having urged them to trade Drake Baldwin. I'm no longer on that train, but I can absolutely see a scenario where Chadwick Tromp, who is out of options, Chadwick Tromp is your backup at catcher, while Drake Baldwin plays every day in the minors. And if either Murphy struggles and they have to go to more of a timeshare versus the 5 starts a week that they want to do with Murphy, or Tromp gets hurt, Baldwin then comes up and gets more playing time, like how you saw William Contreras and Travis d'Arnaud in 2021, right? First base, Matt Olson, 686 of 700 plate appearances. That tracks. 251 batting average, 482 slugging. Far cry from what he did in 2023. That's fine. 3.3 WAR. The end of the day, I don't think I'm mad with this projection. They have Luke Williams taking 14 plate appearances behind him. That could be something where Matt comes out of a blowout. Maybe he finally sits out a game. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. But I'm fine with this. Matt Olson hit 247 this last season. Obviously, that final third of the year was huge. His slugging was 457. So this is him not hitting 23 numbers, but more in the middle between 23 and 24 than just doing what he did last year. Okay, 3.3 WAR for Matt Olson. He was worth 4 last season. Again, I don't think this is counting very much for his defense. I think the projection's a little bit low, but obviously you're not going to make any moves to upgrade first base. You're happy with where you are. Same thing at third base. You look at third base, Austin Riley getting 679 of the 700 plate appearances. Batting 267, worth 4 WAR, a 486 slug, a 353 weighted OBA. I'm fine with this. They've got Nacho Alvarez taking 14 plate appearances and Luke Williams taking 7. Austin Riley is going to play almost every day as long as he's healthy. And I don't necessarily think there's anything you really have to do to upgrade this. If your utility man you sign can play third as a backup, great. But this is Austin Riley's job. Second and short are what are really interesting to me, because they don't value Orlando Arcia that much. And I think they also overstate how much Ozzie Albies is going to play. Orlando Arcia has 665 of the 700 plate appearances at short. Nacho Alvarez has 14, Luke Williams has 14, and prospect Luke Waddell has 7. They have him batting 227 with a 309 slug. But Orlando Arcia is in here as a 238 batting average, a 386 slugging, and he's worth 1.6 WAR. even with his offense being so bad last year, he was worth 0.6 WAR. So he was positive on WAR last year. But the last time he hit 1.6 WAR was 2023, when he batted .264 with 17 home runs. And again, we've talked about his first half was great. He batted almost 300, and his second half was atrocious. Do we feel like Orlando Arcia is going to repeat a 2023 type season? I don't necessarily do. I saw nothing down the stretch that made me feel like Orlando Arcia was figuring it out, right? That he was somehow getting better down the stretch or working out what he did wrong. Is this a vote of confidence in Tim Hires? Maybe it is, because when you look at these months, Orlando Arcia's worst month was September. The end of the year, he batted 176. Oh, correction. June, he batted 155. There's so many ones in here, I got thrown off on which one was the worst one. So I would argue you still need to try to find somebody who can help out at shortstop. I do think it's going to be via trade market versus free agency. Your shortstops in free agency outside of Adames and Kim are nobody to really be excited about. Jose Iglesias, Paul DeYoung, Kevin Newman, Amed Rosario, Nick Ahmed, Tim Anderson. No names to really be excited about, so let's not worry about that. But I do think, and I talked about this a week or two ago, you do need a high-quality middle infield backup because they also have Ozzie Albies taking 658 plate appearances in 2025, batting .267 and being worth 3.5 WAR. And again, I love Ozzie Albies. Let's not get this wrong. I love Ozzie Albies. It is an odd year coming up, an odd number year. So the trend does line up for him to be on the field a lot. I'll remind you, 2021, 156 games. 22, 64 games. 2023, 148. 2024, 99. It feels like every other year he misses significant time. And an odd number year, he should be fine. If he had 686 and 660 on the plate appearances in those 2 years, then 658 in 2025 would follow the pattern. But I still think that's being optimistic, and you need to look for a high-quality middle infield backup for Ozzie Albies. They have Luke Williams taking 21 plate appearances, Nacho Alvarez taking 14, Luke Waddell taking 7. If you can find a starting shortstop and make Arcia that backup, great. If not, I think you need to work to find somebody. They do also break out the outfield here. Center field, not worried about this. Michael Harris, 665 plate appearances, 5.2 WAR. I believe they actually have him as the highest WAR of any player on this roster. He is the number one player for Atlanta in WAR on the entire roster because his defense is so good. His offense is projected to be very good. They have him batting .285, which would be a drop from his first 2 seasons where he batted almost .300. But it's the corners where I think we have to look at this. They have, in right field, they have Ronald Acuna Jr. taking 546 plate appearances and batting .292. We saw what the 2022 season looked like for availability and performance from Ronald Acuna Jr. after his injury. So I worry that this is an optimistic projection. Before he got hurt this year, he batted .250. In 2022, coming off of that injury, he batted .266. So to automatically assume he would jump up to the second highest batting average of his career feels a little bit optimistic to me. Now, I understand he's done this rehab before. He knows how it works. It still feels like that is a little bit of a too optimistic projection here. And I really wish that it was not so high to have a .292 average, right? Behind him, they have Jared Kelenic taking 77 plate appearances, Ramon Laureano taking 42, Eli White taking 21, and Marcell Ozuna taking 14 in right field. So we can just scratch this off and maybe question how useful this is altogether if they have Marcell Ozuna not only playing the outfield, but playing right instead of left. In left, it's almost an even time share between Ramon Laureano and Jared Kelenic. 364 for Laureano, 308 for Kelenic. Eli White gets 28 plate appearances here. Laureano is worth 0.4 WAR, batting .229. Kelenick's worth 0.6 WAR, batting .236 and outslugging Laureano. I don't love either of these projections. I'm worried that Kelenic has not yet figured it out. Obviously, we have no way to know, but he didn't look like he had at the end of last season. Again, new hitting coach. We'll see what happens. And for Laureano, this definitely is impacted by the fact that these projections go back and use not just what you did last season, but the last few. In Cleveland, he batted .143 before they cut him loose in 24. In 23, he batted .243 in Cleveland and .213 with Oakland, so .224 combined. In 22 with Oakland, he batted .211. That is a lot of what is impacting these projections, right? Just like Ronald gets a bump for his 2023 MVP season, Laureano's getting a drag for his 2023 and 2 seasons in these projections. I still think you need to work out something for left field. I don't know if I don't think you're going to, unless you're signing an awesome dude, I don't know what it's going to be. I do think middle infield's more important than left field to figure out because you can make it work with Laureano, Kelenic, Harris, and Acuna when he's back. Eli White can be your fourth outfielder until Acuna's back. Laureano and Kelenic play every day. When Ronald's back, Laureano and Kelenic play. They rotate into left field on days when Ronald does not need a day off. Okay? Still a little bit nerve-wracking. That is your group, and you're really banking on Tim Hires getting Kelenic unlocked and Laureano continuing the career best offensive performance he had with you in 2024. DH, Marcell Ozuna, 651, batting .260. Acuna, 28. Kelenic, 14. Drake Baldwin, 7. I do think in 2026, when Marcell Ozuna's contract is up, if he's not brought back, you do see Baldwin and Sean Murphy getting a lot more at-bats at DH, right? I do see a situation there, a scenario there, where those guys are playing DH a lot more. I'm hesitant to pencil anybody in for DH at-bats in 2025 outside of Marcell Ozuna because he was your MVP last year. He was this team's MVP, 4.3 WAR. He led the position players in WAR and was, obviously, he batted .302, 39 homers, 104 RBI. He outpaced just about everybody in every stat except for stolen bases. Hesitant to say anybody will take it, but I see why Ronald would get one or two here or there. In just a minute, let's talk about the pitching. This is interesting, and I think if this ends up being correct, this could impact how Atlanta approaches the offseason, and we'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby doing a solo show on Veterans Day. Christian, as a veteran, is off today with his wife, who is active duty and home from deployment. If you're watching on YouTube, drop in the comments down below. I thank you to your service for Christian for spending time in the Navy, for both him and the sacrifices he's made for his wife to serve currently right now. Looking at the depth chart projections from Fangraphs on performance and WAR and things like that from this roster in 25, as it stands now, barring free agency signings, assuming they bring back their arbitration guys, etc. The rotation's interesting. They have Spencer Strider for 101 innings. Fifth highest innings count behind the behind the rest of the guys in the rotation. So I find this one really interesting. Chris Sale, 187 innings pitched, 4.5 WAR. They have him at a 3.07 ERA. His year this year was a 2.38, so they have him taking a little bit of a step back. His fielding independent pitching was 2.09. I think Jorge Soler was a big majority of the discrepancy between the fielded independent pitching and the actual ERA. So they have him taking a small step back to a 3.07 ERA and a 2.96 FIP. I feel like it's a little bit of an overcorrection. Again, this is based on previous results for the last few seasons, not just this year, so that's why. Ronaldo Lopez, 179 innings and a 3.90 ERA. Reminder, he threw 135 and 2/3 this year at a 1.99 ERA, although his fielding independent pitching was 2.92. So he outperformed by almost a full run what he was expected to do. And there was a big graphic that went around over the weekend about how many middle fastballs he threw last year and how none of them were hit for extra bases. That kind of thing normalizes to the mean from season to season. So I can see Lopez taking a small step back next year. Do I see him taking a 2-run adjustment up in his ERA? I think that's a little bit extreme. But again, they're projecting off of the last few seasons. And I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. They've got Spencer Schwellenbach at 172 innings with a 3.79 ERA. He pitched to a 3.35 with 123 last season. But again, his performance was significantly skewed by when he first came up and some of his struggles. His ERA to start July was 5.68. And from July through the end of the season, he pitched to a 2.5. And he brought his season ERA down from 5.68 to 3.35. I do think that the July, August, September Schwellenbach is more indicative of who he is than the June Schwellenbach, where he had a lot of those issues where he would get blown up in that 5th or 6th inning. He couldn't get out of the 5th against Boston. He got ambushed by St. Louis. Pittsburgh got him, tagged him for a couple. And I think that he probably outperforms this. Again, this is all barring health. He probably outperforms this. They also have his walk rate at 2.2 per 9, which feels a little high. He was at 1.7 last year. So it feels a little high of an adjustment there, but it's still the best walk rate on the team because he has the best control on the team, let's be honest. And then behind this, Griffin Canning at 125 innings and a 4.52 ERA. That would put him back to around what he did with LA in 2023 when he made 22 starts, 127 innings. He struck out almost 10 batters per 9 with a 4.32 ERA. I do think Atlanta can fix Griffin Canning. This obviously assumes that they are going to pick up his arbitration and not non-tender him. I definitely think they do. They do keep him because you have the questions about when you'll get Strider and at what condition he'll be. They have Strider at a 3.19 ERA, by the way. So they have Strider not being as amazing when he comes back. Behind those 5, Ian Anderson, 73 innings, a 4.28 ERA. AJ Schmishover, 54 innings, and a 4.32. Both those guys are outperformed by Bryce Elder, who has 36 innings and a 4.14 ERA. They've got Herson Waldrop with 27 innings, Drew Hackenberg with 18, and Grant Holmes with only 9 in the rotation. I love Grant Holmes. People who've watched the show have read the stuff on BravesToday.com know I love Grant Holmes. They've said they're going to stretch him out this offseason. Losing Joe Jimenez makes me feel like it is probably more likely when you get Canning and you lose Jimenez, it's probably more likely that Holmes is in the bullpen. But I do think that he would be your guy in the bullpen who you would call and ask to do, hey, I need you to start and go take 5 innings for us. 4 or 5 innings, give us what you can. You'll be down for 3 or 4 days afterwards. We need you to start. I feel like he's that swing man. Partly he has no options, right? You can't send him to the minors. He showed last year that he can be valuable in a starting role. I freaking love Grant Holmes. I'm surprised that they have 9 other guys getting more starts than him. They have Atlanta using 10 starters. I've talked about this. They've used between 10 and 13 traditional starters every year the last 4. Identifying 10 on the roster right now, I think is a good thing. They have 10 right here with Drew Hackenberg being the only one who hasn't debuted. They have Herson Waldrop coming back up for another one for some more starts. I'm guessing off of the innings, probably 4 or 5 starts, probably 5 starts. And so if you have 10 right there, that's nice. But obviously outside of the big 3 of Schwellenbach, Lopez, and Sale, you've got a lot of questions. Canning, can he improve? What can Strider give you and what condition is he in? And again, nobody else has an ERA under 4 outside of that top 5. The bullpen is really interesting because I'm a little confused by some of these ERA projections. Raisel Iglesias is at a 3.45 ERA. He pitched to a 1.95 last year. Now, again, if you're basing this off the last few years, it tells me they're going back to 22 in LA when he had ERA of 4 before he got traded to Atlanta. But they've got Iglesias, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer, Dylan Lee, Grant Holmes, Daysabel Hernandez. Those 6 guys, all with 58 or more innings out of the bullpen. Iglesias at 70, Johnson at 65, Bummer at 62, Lee at 63, Holmes at 60, and Hernandez at 58. I do think you probably need one more guy in that group. That is a strong 6. We've seen this team's reluctant to use Aaron Bummer where they need to use Aaron Bummer. But that is a strong group of 6. I have questions about how much use you'll get out of Grant Holmes if he's having to start some. So I would not hate to add another guy to this. This is where they've added a lot of guys in here. They have Bryce Elder taking 17 bullpen innings, Ian Anderson taking 22, Waldrop at 28, Dylan Dodds at 47 bullpen innings, Domingo Gonzalez, who's added to the 40-man roster to keep him from minor league free agency. They've got him at 50, and then 2 injured guys, Angel Perdomo at 53, Huáscar Ynoa at 54. Ultimately, they have the bullpen at a 3.7 WAR, which feels a little bit low to me, but we'll see what happens. And the bullpen picking up 476 innings total. Interesting here, I do think, and I look at these 2, it does feel like you would love to find another starter. One, you'd love to find another starter. Maybe that's a Nathan Eovaldi. Maybe that is some back-end veteran to be the number 5 in lieu of Griffin Canning, right? Maybe that's maybe Charlie Morton comes back for $10 million. Maybe that's a Max Scherzer or a Justin Verlander. I've heard those names thrown around. Some sort of upper 30s to, and I guess in Scherzer and Verlander's case, a 40-year-old, to come in at a $10 to $15 million deal and be your number 5 starter. Because right now, your 4 in this is Griffin Canning, and they're projecting him for a 4.5 ERA. I think the Atlanta can fix him somewhat. I wrote about this on the Substack right after they acquired him via trade from the Angels, but it's not a guarantee. He's got to figure out where that velocity went year over year. Was that an injury thing? Was that a mechanics thing? Was that a fatigue thing? He's got some work to do on the fastball. It's a dead zone fastball. It doesn't look great. I would feel comfortable with another veteran starter behind your big 3 of Sale, Lopez, and Schoenbach, because that means you don't have to worry about when Strider's back and what condition he's in. You don't have to worry about the workload you can put on an Ian Anderson. You don't have to worry about the acclimation for an AJ Smith-Shawver. Or can Bryce Elder keep you in games, which he did the first half of 23. He didn't do down the stretch in 23, and he didn't do in 24. I do think a veteran starter is probably the number 1 priority for me on here, which is surprising to think about. And then right after that is another relief arm. I think you can make the relief work if you have to. I think you can put Hurston Waldrop in the bullpen if you have to. You could put AJ Smith-Shawver in the bullpen if you had to. I don't want to do that, but you could. Grant Holmes is probably going to be in the bullpen, especially if you get that veteran starter. I do think you can make it work in the bullpen, right? You'll have Daysabel Hernandez. You'll get Perdomo back at some point in time. You can debut Gonzalez and see what he can do. It does feel like you need the starter more so than the reliever, right? Is that a Nathan Eovaldi? Is that some not top free agent, but I'd argue second tier, a guy that you wouldn't be afraid to have start a postseason game for you, but he's not your game 1 guy, right? Is it Yusei Kikuchi? Is it, I would say Sean Manaea, he got a qualifying offer. Is it Andrew Heaney? Is it Shane Bieber when he's able to come back? I don't know, but it feels like that is the more important need over any random reliever. If you can get a top tier reliever, right? And I've talked about wanting Tanner Scott, the lefty, before. I've talked about going out and getting a Jose Leclerc as your closer of the future before. Bringing back AJ Minter, I think, is something they should do. But starter is need number 1 for the pitching. Back end reliever is need number 2. Reliever in general is need number 3. If you think differently, let me know. We're going to be keeping an eye on some of these. Zips projections from Fangraphs should come out this week. Those are a lot more detailed. Dan Simbrowski will have a great article going over those projections as they come out. We're expecting those this week, so we'll talk about those as well. In the meantime, if you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and also leave a 5-star review with some nice comments. That helps folks discover the show when they're looking for Braves content. And then just tell all your friends. BravesToday.com and the Braves Today podcast is the best place to get news, notes, and updates on their Atlanta Braves. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.